This is the Merode Altarpiece by Robert Campin. The authenticity, the authorship is in question. So if you look at your book, the author used to be called the Master of Flamand, and now it's called Robert Campin. I'm not sure that they know entirely. It's one of those things that art historians can argue about. But we'll look at it. We'll call the artist Robert Campin for convenience. This is an altarpiece. It's an Annunciation in the middle. It's called a triptych because the middle is square and the two wings on the side are hinged, and when they close, they cover up the square. So it creates a kind of a box. This is in Manhattan. It's in the Met, but the part of the Met that is in the northwest corner of the island, in a place called the Cloisters. It's worth going to see if you have the opportunity. In this painting, this is the first example we have. It doesn't have any kind of gold ground. It's not a manuscript. This is an actual painting, and it shows all these qualities I've been talking about for the northern artists in great detail. I began the introduction with the northern artist with the work of Sutton Hoo. There's that fine, there's the jewelry that was from maybe 600 A.D. that exhibited qualities of the nomadic peoples who lived in. They were the indigenous people of northern Europe, the people that the Romans conquered, the ones that they called barbarians. Those people had small portable objects that were precious in one way or another, and what made those precious and precious materials, putting in a lot of work in a small space. Here you have a northern artist continuing that same sort of tradition, making a relatively small thing, though bigger than the Jean Pucel's Book of Hours, bigger than the Limburg brothers' Trevish Ur of the Duc de Berry. But it still has that putting a lot of work in a small space quality, and decorative, pretty emphasis on patterns, especially surface patterns. What you see in the middle panel is an Annunciation. There's a room filled with lots and lots of objects. There's two people, Gabriel and Mary, we've seen before in the same orientation as in the Simone Martini and in the Jean Pucel. But it's different in many respects. These appear to be real people in a real room, not just any real room, but a particular room of the period. This is made in 1420s, and this is a home in the Netherlands, in Flanders. The patron sits or kneels in the left panel with his wife, and he looks in the door into his own home. On the right, Joseph is in a small room to the side of the house where he's working, doing his carpentry. We'll look at that shortly. It's a very beautiful picture. It's got a wealth of detail. You can look at it for hours and hours. It's just terrific. Let's look up close and see the main room. The artist has gone to a lot of trouble. I believe it's an oil painting. Oil is one of those new media that it's used because it works better than tempera paint to the kind of things that the northern artist wanted to do. We'll see wide use of oil instead of tempera paint because in tempera paint you make little bitty strokes and you can't correct very well. The paint dries immediately, and there's not a lot of, you can't change it, and you can't do all sorts of wonderful effects. When you use oil, it dries more slowly. You can put glazes, you can do all sorts of things that are neat that the artists in the north they needed to do. They needed something with a little more, they could work with a little more precision. So you have the figures, and think of these in terms of typical northern figures, except that they look more real. Real in the sense that the surface of the cloth looks really, really well defined. The details of all the different kinds of tonal variations within folds of cloth are just painstakingly rendered. You can see a little bit the body underneath of Gabriel here, but overall, he's not interested in the figure in terms of the way the Italians looked at the figure. He's got the cloth covering up just a mass, and the purpose is to emphasize the pattern, the decorative pattern, the folds, just the wonderfulness of the stuff. A little bit of gold trim here with little highlights. He and all these northern artists we're going to look at, they really look at the world and want to reproduce every aspect of the way light falls on materials, the way materials look. They differentiate one from another. It's as if they're trying to show off or, vie with one another for being best at rendering stuff. This is a copper vessel, some cloth, stained glass window, smoke from a candle that's just gone out, maiolica vase, leather, book pages, how they are distorted because they don't lie flat. The hands holding the book, the cloth used to keep the hands from marring the back of the book because it's a precious thing. The pew looks like a church pew here, with its carvings and intricate details. The texture of the tiles on the floor, everything is observed and rendered with loving detail. Just look at the shadows here. How the shadow is sharper, closer to the object, and as it gets farther from the object, it fades away. That's another observed detail. This object is closer, so it's sharper here. And these, oh, look at these. There's multiple shadows because there's multiple light sources. Each light source casts a different shadow, and you've probably seen that phenomenon. But as far as I know, it's the first time I've seen it. It's rendered in paint. Someone has observed all these details, and they want it to look as real as possible. There is something funny about the perspective. A lot of people comment. They say, well, it looks like the things are going to fall off the table. It's sort of pitched up, and the floor is kind of pitched up. And the way you look at these figures, you're looking at them from a point of view different than you're looking from the top of the table. And the vessel in the niche in the background, and things don't seem to be seen from the same point of view. And they aren't. It's because the artist didn't use any kind of method, any kind of system for rendering space. He just made it up. He knows that when he looks up at a ceiling, that the joists on the right are going to recede to the left, and the ones on the left will recede to the right, and they sort of generally come together in the back. But as far as a system where they all come to a certain point, and that everything ought to come to that same point, so as to make a measured one-point perspective space. He's not doing that. In fact, he's not even aware of it. Coincidentally, when this was made in Italy, they were just starting to do this and make paintings with that, but it takes some time before it came up to the north. But he's not concerned with that, and we have to look at this with different eyes. We look at it, we are familiar with photographs. We know how things look when the three-dimensional world has been projected onto a two-dimensional surface. And we have hundreds of years of perspectival images that we've seen, so we know exactly what things ought to look like if you're going to see things from a single point of view. And since everything in this picture looks real within itself, it's hard to believe that if someone would put them all together in different points of view, since realness, the way you see individual objects, should also include its realness in terms of where it is in space, and that's just not the case with this painting. The realness is because the artist is looking at the surfaces of things, and he wants the surface to look exactly like the actual surface of those things. But as far as its placement, it's placed according to some sort of compositional scheme that has nothing to do with anything Italian or perspectival. Look over at Joseph over here. He's got some wonderful things. I guess the kind of homes that this would be would have a wall with a window facing the street, so that someone could make things and then sell their wares on the street like this, and then they'd close up shop when they needed to. Let me zoom in some more. You can see some details like the heads of the nails on these boards have streaks with rust. When the rain hit it, it rusted, and so when these window shutters, I guess, are raised up and held with this clever little device, these marks run in that direction. You have a wonderful image of the city back there with some people walking around. This is sort of comparable to Lorenzetti and the work in the Palazzo Pubblico in Siena. Look at this lattice thing, and it's casting a shadow. Look at the beard, the textures. He looks like he's gone into a carpenter shop and looked at all the tools and copied exactly how they look. How do you render the metal? How light falls upon the metal, how it casts a little shadow. The little shaving pieces, the nails, the pliers, whatever these things are. All the tools, and then how a craftsman holds the tools and how he holds the work as he makes things. Extra things on the floor. A saw, even the little hallmark that the smith had used to identify who made these things. Everything is lovingly rendered so as to make it look like the real world as much as possible. So what's he making is this. This is a mousetrap. There's another kind of mousetrap, and there is a symbolic aspect of mousetrap because I suppose has to do with catching the devil. And this thing that he's making here, putting holes in a piece of wood, where he's marked where he's going to put the holes, and this has to do with a wine press. So there is a religious symbolism that goes on, even in what appears to be an image of everyday life. In the Annunciation, where you expect to see lots of religious symbols and things, well, objects on the table that you would see on any table, this maiolica vase with flowers in it, well, they're lilies. And that's what you would expect to see in Annunciation. The candle being snuffed out here, the one candle up here in the candle holder. This vessel, the idea of Mary as a vessel of Christ, as she's the mother of Christ. That vessel aspect, but it's also the vessel in a niche that where you'd wash your hands and you dry your hands on this piece of cloth, which looks very much like a Jewish prayer shawl. You can see the little baby Jesus, the little spirit of Jesus with its cross is coming through the glass, and just the notion of coming through glass is a reference to Mary and her virginity, in the sense that the spirit, the light goes through glass without, it penetrates it without affecting it, so that Mary was able to become pregnant while still remaining a virgin. Let's look at the patrons. This is their garden in front of their house. It's a closed garden, and a closed garden is a symbol of Mary as well. The patron looks. Well, let's look at his face as close as we can. He's not that handsome. He looks kind of odd and weird. If he actually looked like that, the artist was not told to make him look better. In fact, the artist probably was intent upon making him look exactly like he looked. Same with his wife. Mary's face, we look back real quick. She is a type. This is a type for Mary's face. It stays the same from picture to picture and from year to year as other things advance in terms of naturalism, but Mary's face tends to stay pretty much like that. But when someone is rendered who's an actual person, they look at all the different aspects of their face, the shape of their nose, the shape of their lips, the color of their skin, how their eyes look, all these qualities, and the stuff that they wear when they dress up to have their picture made. Everything is rendered because the desire, to satisfy this client was to make him look like himself, so to show that he is the one in the picture. And what's going on here? If it's kind of odd that a person would be looking at the Annunciation is happening in his home, but he's experiencing what's called a vision, like an ecstatic vision. People would meditate upon Christian subjects like the joys of the Virgin and the sorrows of the virgins, and they would have visions of them. So he's having a vision of this in his room, in his actual living room, I guess, and I guess so is his wife, and they are rendered as if they are real. The figures of the Annunciation, Gabriel and Mary, are rendered as if they are real, just as real as every other object in the room. But we are to understand that it is a vision. This is a mysterious figure in the back. Some people suggest that it might be a self-portrait of Robert Campin. There's some magpies back here, and I'm sure that they have a symbolic meaning too. One of the things we're going to see lots of in Northern art is that they like to fill ordinary, everyday stuff, rooms and spaces, with objects that look like the sort of thing that you would see in an everyday object, like this vase and this candlestick and this copper pot, and have them two meanings. One is that they are the actual object, and they have a symbolic meaning as well. That just comes up a lot. Beautiful pictures, about 2 feet tall. I don't know, 4 feet wide. It's just